Multiplying decimals, like multiplying fractions, is all about making more pieces. Let's start by using area models and fraction multiplication to help us better understand decimal multiplication. Well, here we have 2 tenths times 2 tenths. So in our area model, to represent the first 2 tenths, we're going to shade 2 out of 10 of our horizontal rows in pink. Then to represent our second 2 tenths, we're going to shade 2 out of our 10 vertical rows in blue. Our solution lies where the pink and blue overlap, so these squares up here. Pink and blue comes out to fill 4 out of 100 total squares. So that means 2 tenths times 2 tenths comes out to be 4 hundredths. If we look at our fraction multiplication, we know the 4 comes from multiplying our numerators, 2 times 2 to give me 4, and the 100 comes from multiplying our denominators, 10 times 10 to give me 100. Well, now compare that to decimals. We know 2 tenths in decimal form is equivalent to 2 tenths in fraction form. So 2 tenths times 2 tenths is still going to give me 4 hundredths. The question is, how do we get there without using our fractions first? Well, we can see we still have 2 times 2 to give me 4. The question is, where does the 10 times 10 to give me 100 come in? Well, decimals don't have denominators, but they have place values behind the decimal. Tenths is represented by 1 decimal place. So I have 1 decimal place here, and I have 1 decimal place here. Well, tenths times tenths does give me 100, and hundredths is represented by 2 decimal places. So if I count how many total decimal places I have in my factors, that tells me how many total decimal places I'm going to need in my product. To place it, I would start here on the right and move that number of places to the left. So I would start my decimal here on the right and move 2 places to the left to give me 4 hundredths. Let's try one more using just decimals. Here we're going to start with 6 tenths times 5 tenths. Well, like we saw with our fractions, we need to go ahead and multiply our values together. So 6 times 5 gives me 30. Now we have to figure out what our place value is going to be. So we have to look at how many total decimal places we have. 6 tenths is represented by 1 decimal place. And same thing here, 5 tenths is represented by 1 decimal place. Well, we know from fractions, multiplying tenths times tenths gives me hundredths, and we know that hundredths is represented by 2 decimal places, which is the total number of decimal places we have in our factors. So to place out my product, I'm going to start here on the right, and I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left, and that's going to come out to give me 30 hundredths. Well, let's check that using an area model. First, I need to shade in 6 tenths. So that means I'm going to shade in 6 out of my 10 rows in pink. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. To represent the 5 tenths, I'm going to shade in 5 out of my 10 columns in blue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our solution is going to be represented where the pink and blue overlap, so by these squares here. If we count up, that's a total of 30 squares that are shaded with both pink and blue out of the 100 total squares in our area model. So again, our area model shows 30 hundredths or 30 hundredths that we also came up with through our decimals. We're going to solve these few using just our algorithm. Here we have 12 hundredths times 5. We're going to ignore the decimals and line everything up on the right like we would with whole numbers. Now we're going to continue to ignore the decimal and go ahead and multiply like we would with whole numbers. So 2 times 5 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 1 is 6, so that gives me 60. Now I have to look at placing my decimal. In my first factor, I have 2 decimal places, and then in my second factor, I have 0 decimal places. That means in my product, I'm going to need a total of 2 decimal places. Well, I'm going to start here on the right, and I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left. That gives me a product of 60 hundredths. Let's try again using this problem over here. Here we have 124 thousandths times 65 hundredths. Again, I'm going to ignore my decimals and line everything up on the right like I would with whole numbers. So 124 thousandths times 65 hundredths. And now I can go ahead and multiply like I would with whole numbers. 4 times 5 is 20. 5 times 2 is 10 plus my carried 2 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5 plus my carried 1 is 6. Now to multiply my next row, 4 times 6 is 24. 6 times 2 is 12 plus my carried 2 is 14. 6 times 1 is 6 plus my carried 1 is 7. So now we can add our values together. Here we have 0, 6, 10, and then 8. Well, we know our total isn't going to come out to be 8,060, so we need to place our decimal point. Here in our first factor, we have a total of 3 decimal places, and in our second factor, we have a total of 2 decimal places. That means our product is going to need a total of 5 decimal places. So I'm going to start my decimal here on the right, and I'm going to move it 5 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But my product doesn't have enough values in it, so that means I have to fill in this first spot with a 0. That means we come out with a product of 8,060 hundred thousandths.